In the summer of 1794, the man responsible for sending thousands to their deaths would meet the very instrument of terror he had used with cold precision. Maximilien Robespierre, known across France as the Incorruptible, had become the face of revolutionary justice and excess. His name sent chills down the spines of both nobles and common folk. Under his reign, the guillotine was the ultimate judge in French politics. It's a bitter twist of fate that history wouldn't overlook. The same blade that had taken the lives of kings, queens, and countless citizens would soon take its most infamous champion. This is the tale of how the architect of the Reign of Terror became its final, most symbolic victim. His jaw shattered, he could not say a final word as he walked to the scaffold he had made infamous. Robespierre's execution on July 28, 1794, was not just about ending a life, it was an end to an entire era. It symbolized the French Revolution consuming its own children, a fitting end to a time when justice and revenge blurred together. To grasp the brutal irony of his death, we need to trace how a mere provincial lawyer rose from obscurity to become the most feared man in France. The French Revolution ignited in 1789 amid financial crisis, social inequality, and political corruption. King Louis XVI's monarchy was on the brink of bankruptcy, while the common people faced starvation. The old feudal system was deteriorating, pulling down centuries of order. Into this mess stepped Maximilien Robespierre, a 30-year-old lawyer from Arras. He would shift from an idealistic defender of the poor to the very face of revolutionary terror. The revolution moved through sharp stages, getting more radical with each turn. What started as calls for a constitutional monarchy morphed into demands for a republic, which escalated to the systematic purging of perceived enemies. By 1793, France was at war with most of Europe, facing uprisings from within and spiraling into paranoia. The revolutionary government, known as the Committee of Public Safety, declared terror would be the order of the day. Robespierre rose as the leading voice in this extreme phase. His political ideas drew heavily from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, especially the concept of the general will of the people. He believed that the revolution was about winning virtue over corruption, and any hurdle to this change had to be removed. This strict ideology paved the way for massive violence ahead. The guillotine, created by Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine, was meant to be a humane way to execute people, but it quickly became a symbol of revolutionary justice. Unlike past execution methods that depended on your social status, the guillotine promised equality in death. It offered a quick, painless end for everyone facing it. Under Robespierre's influence, this national razor went into overdrive, taking lives at a staggering rate. From September 1793 to July 1794, known as the Reign of Terror, an astonishing 17,000 people were condemned to death by revolutionary tribunals. The guillotine operated daily in Paris, drawing crowds who cheered as heads rolled into baskets. What started as a tool for justice had turned into a machine for mass execution, with Robespierre pulling the strings. During this time, fear and suspicion gripped Paris. Neighbors snitched on neighbors. Children turned in parents. Former allies became bitter enemies. In September 1793, the law of suspects made it easy to arrest anyone seen as hostile to the revolution. Under Robespierre's watch, the definition of an enemy expanded. It wasn't just those who opposed the revolution, it included anyone who didn't show enough passion for the cause. The political terror was worsened by economic hardship. Despite promises from the revolution, bread was still hard to find and expensive. The revolutionary currency, the assignats, lost much of its worth. Social tensions skyrocketed as different revolutionary groups fought for power and resources. In this atmosphere of scarcity and fear, the guillotine became more than just a tool of justice. It was a release valve for public anger and frustration. The international situation made things even worse. France found itself at war against Austria, Prussia, Britain, and others, determined to crush the revolution. Military losses and foreign attacks were blamed on internal traitors, justifying severe purges. Robespierre and his allies insisted that only through terror could France protect itself from both foreign and domestic threats. By early 1794, the situation was only growing more dire. The revolution hit many of its early targets. The monarchy was gone, feudalism erased, and a new republic was born. But then the machinery of terror started to take on a life of its own. Robespierre, convinced that the revolution was still in danger, pushed for more purges, more executions, and constant vigilance against both real and imagined enemies. Maximilien Robespierre may not have operated the guillotine himself, but he was its most persuasive supporter and its main operator. His approach was more complex than just a thirst for blood. It was a calculated plan of political terror aimed at cleansing France of anyone who opposed his idea of revolutionary purity. Standing at just about 5 feet 7 inches with pale skin and meticulously styled hair, Robespierre seemed an unlikely figure to lead mass executions. His daily life showed how methodical he was in spreading fear. Each morning, he'd sift through lists of suspected counter-revolutionaries made by his network of informants. He worked from modest rooms on Rue Saint-Denis, surrounded by piles of accusations and reports. His neat handwriting authorized hundreds of death sentences with the same care someone might use to plan dinner. The terror machinery relied heavily on the Revolutionary Tribunal, which Robespierre helped reshape for better efficiency. Trials that once dragged on for days now wrapped up in mere hours, or even minutes. The accused faced judges who had already made up their minds based on political needs, not evidence. Defense attorneys were seen as unwelcome hurdles in the pursuit of justice. The only outcomes were acquittal or death, and it quickly became rare for anyone to walk free. Robespierre's speeches in front of the National Convention were masterpieces of revolutionary language, blending moral ideas with practical politics. He would take to the podium, his thin voice rising passionately as he called for the elimination of the enemies of the people. He framed his arguments as a battle between virtue and corruption, the people versus their oppressors. Every execution was painted as a necessary step to protect the revolution and save the innocent. Under Robespierre's regime, the actual process of execution became standardized. Condemned inmates were transported from their cells to the Place de la Révolution in wooden carts. With drummers beating and crowds gathering, the guillotine loomed on a raised platform, its towering 40-foot posts splashed in blood red. The executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, carried out his gruesome tasks with chilling speed, sometimes sending dozens to their deaths in just one day. Robespierre didn't usually attend these grim events, preferring to stay in his office, going over more cases and crafting speeches. Yet, his influence was undeniable. Each execution followed the strict rules he had laid out: the reading of charges, the positioning of the victim, the swift drop of the blade, and then the shocking display of the severed head to the crowd. The fear instilled by Robespierre's reign of terror stretched well beyond the individuals facing the guillotine. The mere idea that anyone could be denounced, arrested, and executed in mere days created a suffocating atmosphere of anxiety. People started changing the way they behaved, spoke, and even thought to fit in with revolutionary ideals. Just saying Robespierre's name could silence a room and clear the air. His surveillance network was vast and clever. The Committee of Public Safety kept detailed files on thousands of citizens, tracking their political leanings, relationships, and comments. Local revolutionary groups regularly reported on suspicious behavior in their areas. Children were even encouraged to inform on their parents if they suspected any counter-revolutionary thoughts. This culture of universal distrust was Robespierre's biggest innovation in the technology of terror. During the height of his terror, the efficiency of the killing machine was unmatched in European history. The guillotine in Paris executed an average of 3 people each day, with some days seeing many more. The process ran like clockwork, with victims moving from arrest to execution in just over a week. The full extent of Robespierre's terror becomes evident through the stories of those who suffered. Witnesses, executioners, and the condemned themselves described their haunting final moments. One of the most shocking stories is that of his former ally, Georges Danton, whose execution in April 1794 revealed Robespierre's readiness to eliminate even those closest to him. Danton had been a powerful figure, crucial in the revolution's early days. The revolution took a dark turn when Danton, a key figure, found himself on trial for speaking out against the executions. He stood in the courtroom, his powerful voice resonating as he declared, "Show me my crimes." He insisted he had always supported the revolution, but Robespierre saw Danton's call for restraint as a threat. When Danton was ultimately silenced and led to the guillotine, he turned to the executioner and said, "Don't forget to show my head to the people. It's worth seeing." In October 1793, Marie Antoinette's execution marked Robespierre's ruthless dismantling of the old regime. The once queen, now referred to as Widow Capet, was carted off to her death with her hands tied behind her back. Witnesses noted her poise despite the crowd's insults. When she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot while climbing the scaffold, she simply apologized. Even in her last moments, as the blade descended, she maintained her composure. Madame Roland, a talented salon host and political writer, faced a similar fate. Though she had initially supported the revolution, she was condemned for her moderate views. From the scaffold she exclaimed, "O liberty, what crimes are committed in thy name?" Her execution shocked even the staunchest revolutionaries, as many admired her intellect and patriotism. Then there was the case of the Girondins, a group of 21 moderate deputies who were eliminated in October 1793. They had played a role in toppling the monarchy, but opposed the radical tactics of the Terror. As they were marched to the guillotine, they sang the Marseillaise, their voices fading as each one met their end. The last to die, Charles Éléonore Dufresne-d'Illes, even managed to stab himself with a hidden dagger, slipping past the guillotine's grasp. Robespierre's reach extended to the young as well. 14-year-old Marie-Jeanne Beau, condemned for crying when her parents were arrested, faced the same fate. The executioner, Sanson, later wrote that her youth and innocence lingered in his mind, but the Terror knew no boundaries when it came to age or innocence. As the situation grew more dire, even some of Robespierre's backing started to waver. They questioned a system that could send children to the guillotine just for crying. The concierge prison became a reflection of France under the Terror. Nobles and commoners, priests and atheists, men and women of all ages, shared the same fate in those last days. The Abbé Carichon, who comforted the condemned, recorded their final confessions. Many were confused about how they ended up there, unable to grasp why their love for the revolution wasn't enough. Take Olympe de Gouges, for example. The feminist writer who crafted the Declaration of the Rights of Woman was executed for advocating women's rights and challenging Robespierre's growing dictatorship. As she climbed to the scaffold, she declared, "Children of the fatherland, you will avenge my death." With her execution, one of the revolution's strongest voices was silenced, proving that even supporters of equality were not safe. Then there was Charles-Henri Sanson, the executioner responsible for many killings. He kept detailed notes on his grim work. He shared how killing so many took a toll on him, often having to execute people he once knew. His assistants frequently broke down under the pressure of the relentless bloodshed. Even the mechanics of the guillotine became routine. The way victims were positioned, the blade was cleaned, the bodies disposed of. Foreign observers noted the fear that gripped Paris during this time. British spy William Wickham reported that even committed revolutionaries lived on edge, fearful that a stray comment might lead to their end. Similarly, American diplomat Gouverneur Morris remarked how Parisian streets fell silent, with citizens avoiding gatherings to dodge overheard, risky remarks. Robespierre's reign of terror left deep scars in French society, wounds that would take generations to heal. The use of government violence as a political tool changed how people viewed their relationship with power, setting new standards that influenced revolutionary movements across the globe. The very idea of ideological purity began to take hold, forcing its way into the very fabric of society. Mass executions set a model for future totalitarian regimes, from Stalin's Soviet Union to Pol Pot's Cambodia. After Robespierre was executed, a wave of relief washed over France, like a fresh breeze. People who had lived in constant fear suddenly found their voices again. The surviving prisoners in the conciergerie were freed, and the revolutionary tribunals were taken down. The guillotine, which had taken thousands of lives, was put away for good, though it would reappear during future political chaos. The economic fallout from the terror was just as harsh. Constant fear froze commerce and industry. Skilled artisans and merchants either fled the country or were executed, leaving huge gaps in the economy that took years to fill. The assignats, which were the revolutionary paper money, had become nearly worthless because of the political chaos. Foreign trade had dried up, as other nations viewed France as a dangerous outcast. Robespierre's tactics shaped how modern police states and surveillance systems evolved. His network of informants and local revolutionary committees became a blueprint for later authoritarian regimes wanting to keep tabs on their populations. The idea of preventive detention, locking people up for what they might do instead of what they had done, became a key tool for oppressive governments around the world. The intellectual fallout from the terror sparked endless debates about the links between revolution and violence. Political theorists spent years dissecting how noble goals could lead to such brutal outcomes. The idea of revolutionary necessity, the belief that extreme situations justify extreme actions, became a common theme in later revolutionary movements, often with tragic results. The psychological impact on survivors defined an entire generation of French citizens. Those who lived through the terror were left with deep scars from constant fear and the loss of loved ones. Trust in the government and fellow citizens crumbled under the weight of mutual surveillance and betrayal. This psychological trauma added to France's political instability for decades to come. The world watched in shock at Robespierre's reign of terror. For the next 100 years, European politics felt the ripple effects of the revolution in France. Conservative governments leaned on this example to justify their tough measures against their own people. They argued that any hint of liberal change could spark a similar bloody uprising. The fear of revolution became a powerful tool to keep things as they were all over Europe. The terror left a deep mark on religious life in France too. The crackdown on clergy and the push to replace Christianity with the cult of reason hurt French Catholic culture in lasting ways. Many churches were either destroyed or turned into other kinds of spaces, and the relationship between church and state stayed heated even into modern times. Robespierre's influence on legal systems around the globe was also notable. The quick and often cruel nature of revolutionary justice served as a warning for those looking to reform the law. It led to stronger protections for the accused in many places. The idea that political need should never eclipse due process became essential in today's democratic legal systems. Maximilien Robespierre's rise and fall tells a timeless cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the allure of strict ideological beliefs. He went from being an idealistic lawyer fighting for the poor to the mastermind behind state terror. This shows how chasing virtue can sometimes turn into acts of evil. The man who called himself incorruptible ended up corrupted by his own sense of righteousness. Robespierre's last moments were tragic. With a shattered jaw, he couldn't say the words that had once signaled death for so many. This irony runs deep. The very words that made him the revolution's voice were taken from him at the end. Maybe it was fitting for someone whose policies had silenced so many others. The guillotine that took his life was the same tool he used against his opponents, making his death a chilling example of revolutionary justice turning against itself. The questions raised by Robespierre's terror are still troublingly relevant today. How do societies tell apart necessary change from harmful extremism? When does the quest for justice morph into an act of injustice? How can democratic movements stop authoritarian leaders from rising? They claim to represent the people, yet silence their voices. These questions aren't easy to answer, but Robespierre's story shows us that we must always stay alert to the abuse of power. The French Revolution spiraled into terror, highlighting that good intentions alone can't stop disastrous results. Robespierre truly believed he was fighting for justice and equality. but his actions led to immense suffering and oppression. This gap between noble aims and harsh methods reminds us that how we go after our goals matters just as much as the goals themselves. Sometimes, the ends, as Robespierre's tale shows, don't justify the means. What's perhaps most disturbing is that Robespierre wasn't a monster, he was a man, just like us. Driven by familiar feelings and urges, he feared opponents, craved order, couldn't stand dissent, and believed in his own righteousness. We all share these traits. This realization should make us more vigilant about the potential for tyranny within ourselves and those in power. The capacity for great good and great evil lies within every heart, and the line separating them might be thinner than we'd like to admit. The guillotine that ended Robespierre's life back in the summer of 1794 symbolizes justice twisted and power abused. His execution didn't just close the chapter on terror, it began a lengthy journey of healing and reflection that continues even now. Robespierre's life and death remind us that democracy is shaky, freedom demands constant watchfulness, and failing to safeguard our institutions could lead to consequences beyond our imagination. Ultimately, Robespierre's legacy confronts us with uncomfortable truths about human nature and political power. His story is both a warning and a challenge. A warning of the risks posed by unchecked power and extreme ideologies, and a challenge to create systems and cultures that resist tyranny. The blood that once stained the streets of Paris over 200 years ago holds lessons that still resonate painfully today. Ignoring them could lead to dire consequences,